signatures. You can see right here there's a tiny little number 2. Well, each signature is numbered, so that's also another great way to help you keep them collated in the right order, which is obviously an important thing to have in a book. When last we spoke, it was probably around the end of February. I just returned from Cuba. We had a great time visiting all of the sites there, Hemingway's hotel room and all of that stuff as we saw. That was the last video actually I did back then. So, yeah, it's been a little different the last little while, but you know what? I'm ready to get back at her. So let's get set. If you will recall, last September, I want to say, I took a trip out to Gibbons, Alberta to their town-wide garage sale, and I found a copy of 1885 first Canadian edition of Huckleberry Finn. And at that point, if you want to go back and look at that video, it's from September 24th. 2019. We had a look at the book and went through it and said, oh, here's all the stuff that needs to be done. Well, I have finally got around to getting started on doing some of that. So I'll show you what I've been up to. Okay, we are going to look at some of the guarding I've done on the signature edges, because that is the first step that really I needed to do on these. If you recall, the text block looked something like this. I have since pulled it apart, cleaned up the spine edge a little bit, although it was pretty clean to start with, so didn't have to do a whole lot there. You'll notice this line I've put on here with a pencil. That's so when I'm working on this, if I see a signature, that doesn't line up quite properly, that's a good way to make sure that they're all in the right sequence. Although, on these signatures, you can see right here there's a tiny little number 2. Well, each signature is numbered, so that's also another great way to help you keep them collated in the right order, which is obviously an important thing to have in a book. So I have done five of the signatures so far. It's been pretty good, pretty smooth sailing. Some of them need more work than others. This very first one, for instance, I had to go in and repair the very interior bits of the signatures. As you see, they all fit in together, right? So I had to go in and fix the interior edges first, and this all ended up being one solid piece, which is okay. There's our title page. Very fortunate, actually, that everything is complete here in terms of the text block. We don't have anything off of the boards or the spine. That's all missing. But that's fine, because we're going to completely rebind it and make new ones anyway. So, yeah, you fix the interior bits first, then you just make your way through the signatures till it's all complete. And it's a nice, good, solid edge, so that when you're sewing, when we come back and sew this, you'll have something to sew to. You can see these others, very similar kinds of shape. Yeah, they've turned out really nicely. I'm using very, very thin rice paper. It is 10 gram. You can almost see through it. It's so thin, and that's because we want to keep the swell under control. One of the things you have to keep an eye out is when you are resewing, especially when you've had to guard almost all of the edges, it tends to thicken the spine edge, and you want to make sure that you keep it to a decent size so that it doesn't exceed the thickness of the foredge, because it makes for a real lousy book. Okay, I'm going to keep working on these. I'll show you how I do that in the next step. Oh, that's hard in the knees. Okay, I'm just going to clarify what the swell is. I looked it up. So, this is the spine edge, obviously. And this is the foredge. So when I sew this back together, I have to make sure the spine should be 125% of the thickness of the foredge. Maybe 130, but you know, closer to 125 you can keep it, the better looking your book is going to be. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that we use this very thin material, the 10 gram rice paper. And I cut my strips that we're going to use here very thin as well. So I just have a couple of marks on my cutting surface so that I try to keep these uniform as we go through. And if I need a thicker piece, I just cut a thicker piece if it's called for. But like I say, you want to keep the less material you use, the better. The easier it is to control the amount of swell you have to deal with. Okay, so we cut that. Now I'm going to move all this stuff over here. We'll turn this way. I've got some nice fresh paste here, and it's purposefully made on the thin side. It's even a little bit watery, you might say. So I just run some on my piece of slate here. Put the sharp things away. Take my little thin piece of rice paper. I'm just going to set it in the paste. I'm going to let that soak. Give it a little help here and there. You have to be careful though, because this is so thin that sometimes you touch it and it just starts to fray and get really hard to handle, which, you know, you want to avoid. I'm going to have some wax paper over here. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up with my very thin-edged spatula. So I'm going to move the camera first because it's tricky. I'll pick this up. Okay, here it is. I'm going to lay it on my wax paper as straight as I possibly can. There we go. And I will take my signature, make sure that it's nice and square, nothing sticking out the top, the bottom, the foredge is good. Everything is kind of tucked in along the spine edge here, and you have to work with what you've got here. These edges have been like this since 1885. You know, they get a little cranky when you try to start changing the shape of them, so you just work with what you've got. I'm going to take this, lay it along my piece on here, which is not straight down. what if I do that, like that? Okay, and then I just take my wax paper and I fold it over the edge. I want to make sure it's as snug as I can possibly make it along the edge here. And again, this is to solidify this edge so that when we're sewing, we have something to sew to. It's easy to tear paper along this edge when you're pulling the, sewing and pulling thread. Okay, so I'm just going to lightly rub that on there. Oops, let's clean that. I'm just going to flip this over. Give this edge a little bit of a how do you do. Back over we go, and I'm just going to see. No, it's not sticking there. This is the trickiest bit, is getting the wax paper off without having the rice paper come with it. And it's gonna argue a little bit. That's okay. Just gently make sure this is going where I want it to go, which is right there. Dang, a little bit on there. And of course, wheat paste is water-based, so you want to make sure you put it where it isn't going to stain, paper that is visible, right? Okay, and we're just going to take this off the back side. Oh, that's not cooperating. So you know what we're going to do? We'll flip that over again. We've got a little issue right here. It's always a juggle to see, make sure you're using enough paste, but not so much that you're, creating water stains on there. So I'm just going to touch that up just a little bit. The idea is we want to make sure that all the holes for sewing have some material on them. Boy, that was thin. I could have used a little more paste to start with. Okay, now that is gonna be a little bitchy. That's okay. Just gonna finesse that around a little bit. Okay. All right, there we go. Now, I will take this, set it in between. These are just pieces of board that are covered with this. I can't remember what it's called. It's, glue won't stick to it. Put it on there. Set my ruler on top of that. And then a weight, and that's how you guard. So I'll go through and I'll do the rest of the text block and get them all together, and then we can sew. If I come across something interesting in the in some of these other signatures, we'll have a peek. Okay, I'll be back. Whoa. Okay, we have all the signatures prepared, guarded, fixed up, ready to go. Now we are going to repunch our holes on the signature edge for sewing. So I have made a template. You can see these little notches on the edge here. This fits inside the middle of the repaired signature. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. So this should be the center, but we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. Excellent. So we know that's dead center. You can see that the existing holes are here. I have to add 2 holes so that we can go in, around, back in. I'm not exactly familiar with the sewing technique that was originally used, but we're going to use this one to rebind it. So I have a sheet of plexi. I set this signature on top. I have a weight you can't quite see there, but it keeps the plexiglass from sliding around. Take our template and line it all up. And I have the benefit, like I say, of the existing holes. So that's a really good guideline to follow. Line that up nicely. This edge is just hanging over the edge of the plexiglass just a little bit. And then I'm going to put this weight on here so everything's solid. So when I work on it, nothing's going to shift around. I take my owl, owls are birds. This is an awl, A-W-L. Has a very fine tip on the end, very sharp, because we don't need to make a very big hole, just big enough for a sewing needle to go through. So smaller is actually better. So we just take and push that through on each of the spots like that. Move our weight a little bit. Hopefully you can still see. Push it in, and I want to make sure that hole goes right on the very edge of the spine. I don't want it too much on this side or too much on that side. I want it dead center on the crease of the signature. Just makes for nicer, neater sewing and a tidier text block. Okay, so there you go. Those are the holes punched in. Take our template out, set it up there. I'll just double check. Yeah, those work pretty good. I'm not sure how well we can actually see that, but here's our 2 holes. 2 holes, kettle stitch hole here at this end, and 2 sewing holes. So we have 1, 2, 3. That's where our cords will go. We're going to sew around those. Tie them off the kettle stitches, go back and forth the whole text block until we have a text block. Okay, I have a whole stack of these yet to do. I'm going to carry on. So I've started the sewing. I've done the first third. Typically you sew the book together in thirds so that you can measure the swell as you progress, and if you need to make adjustments, you can do so before you get finished. So I'm going to start on the second third. I've got my needle and thread all prepared. The thread is waxed with beeswax so that it pulls smoothly through the paper as you're sewing. You want to eliminate any tearing or pulling. We don't want to make any more damage that we just repaired, so that helps. Okay, hopefully you can get a sense here from this angle of what we're going to do. So I have my next section here that's going to get sewn in. As you can see, here we are. This is the first third, and we're sewing onto 3 cords, and these are what we will use to attach the text block to the boards when we get to that point. So I have to be extremely careful that we are sewing these in the correct order as we go. So I have them laid out over here. So when I pick them up, I turn it, I lay it down and lay it in place. And I always double check to make sure that the page number here, page 112, yeah, it's going to be followed by page 113. So I know that is the correct section. Also, we have the number 8 here. So this is the 8th section of leaves that we repaired. And each section is numbered in order. So that's another way that we can double check. We've also got our pencil line here. We can follow that so we can make sure you can see that piece. Yep, that's the one. Okay, so we line it up on the holes. First of all, though, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, which should give us the center, and it is. Of course, all our holes are pre-poked as we saw earlier. Just make sure that this section is nice and square. And I just put this in here so that I know where center is. If I need to check, I can access that quickly. Okay, so we take our sewing needle with its rounded end. That's not sharp at all. And I'm going to start from the kettle stitch, the last kettle stitch that I tied in, and we will go straight into the hole here. Now this is a little awkward because I'm doing this for the camera angle. Okay, so don't sew like this at home. Okay, so we pull this thread through. It's 25 gauge thread, by the way. And we just snug that into place. I slide the needle down the gutter and it will find, there we go, it'll find the hole that we poked in there, and it should line up exactly with this cord, and it is. So we just have to be careful right at this stage, because if you pull too much, you'll just tear the paper. We find the next hole on the other side of the cord, and we just gently work it through. I can feel on the other side here with my left hand. I can feel it come through. Again, just gently pull, and we always pull the thread. If you can just see my left hand over here, we pull the thread in the direction that we're sewing, so that if we do tug it a little too much or something, it shouldn't tear. It'll just go, hey. Okay, so there's that one there. This cord, the holes on it are not as neat and tidy as I would like them to be. Can't always get what you want. Okay, and then we just keep, again, we'll slide the needle down till we find our next hole, which is on, as you can see here, on that side of the cord. Again, we're going to pull this in the direction we're sewing. And nice and gently. Do not be in a rush when you're doing this. And now I will just gently kind of pull this way a little bit and snug this piece of thread around that cord. And you don't have to be quite as fussy on the end, because we're going to tie that with a kettle stitch. Okay, so we go around this one. If need be, I've got this little stick tool, and if I need to, I can come and just gently tap those down, make sure I get everything where I want it. Don't really need to do that at this point, just a little demonstration. Okay, find the next hole, which is being fussy, so I'm going to come around from the back side because I can see the hole here. I'm just going to push that through. There we go. Yes, there it is. And again, when you're sewing, you want to, or punching the holes in all of these signatures, you want to keep them small. You don't need them any bigger than they need to be, so because they will want to, especially with older paper, they'll just want to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and we don't want that. Okay, pull that. Slide down here to our third and final cord. If I can find the needle over here. Slide it along, find our hole, there it is. Again, pull the thread gently and in the direction, oops, that we are sewing. Just make sure you have to be careful that the thread doesn't bunch up a knot on the other side on you. That's you want to avoid knots, obviously. Okay, find this hole, there it is. Pull it through, and again, I just want to pull that thread so that this is securely attached to those cords. And it is. I'm just going to gently tap those down, because again, we want to keep this nice and snug and tight as we progress. The other thing you need to be wary of is that these are all lining up as you go. So as you build this up, the top edge is nice and smooth and configured all the same. There we go, there we go. So I'll show you quickly how we do a kettle stitch. Not sure how well this is going to translate. We take our needle, we count down 1, 2, 3 signatures, and be careful that we don't poke through any paper. Push it through underneath, pull it through gently, and I'm going to give this one more little snug. Now, there we go. We've got a little loop here at the end. We can see that. So I come underneath that loop, pull it up and through, and you pull it up nice and snug, make a little skinny knot there, and that's your kettle stitch. And then you get the next section, put it on top, start it from this end, sew back down, kettle stitch, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until you are done sewing and you have a text block, and then we can move to the next step. So I am going to stop here with this episode on the sewing. I'm going to finish it up, and then our next video we will start on the rounding and the backing and prepping the text block, so we can get the boards attached and keep moving through. Okay, thanks for watching this episode. It's good to be back. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next segment on the Huck Finn rebind.